This is so fucking brutal, man. Visible from space, Sudan's bloodied sands expose a massacre of thousands. Satellite pictures taken after the fall of Fasher show evidence of mass killings. The pools of blood are so thick, the piles of bodies so exposed, that the ethnic purge allegedly committed by Sudanese paramilitary rebels is visible from space. Basically like a power struggle between two people who were once more or less on the same side. Rivalry between General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the de facto president, and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, his deputy, flared into open fighting in April 2023. So that's what I mean. The RSF leader was the deputy of the regular military's leader. And all the while, you've got these black African, like the non-Arab minorities in the south who bear the brunt of all of this fucking nonsense between these two wankers, resulting in the worst humanitarian crisis of the present day. In this war alone, I think in the last 2 years, since the fighting started in 2023, I believe 150,000 people have died in this conflict, not to mention millions of people being displaced. Okay. What part of Gaza is Sudan? How can I help? Shut up. Shut up! So I've already got started. When the news broke, and last night and today, I was just having a little browse online about what's going on over there in Sudan. So far, I've got like a rough timeline. Got a little, let me put myself here for Obsidian. Whoa. Right off the screen. Yeah, we've got ourselves like a rough timeline ever since, dating back to Ottoman rule, I guess. More like / Egyptian rule. And then we're going down to British involvement. Then we got World War II, the Egyptian Revolution, pretty pivotal part for Sudan, independence, military coup. They had an elected parliament and prime minister for just over 10 years. And then it's just been coups ever since, coups and military dictatorships. Communist Party launches a coup in 71, but the original military leader is returned to power after several days. So their communist revolution lasted literally a few days. Sudanese civil war, big north and south thing. North and south conflict, lots to do with racism and the like. Not all racism though, there's other elements to it too. It's obviously mostly simplified to racism because it's like the easiest way to describe it and the most obvious. Military coup in 89, war in Darfur. This is where one of the groups that is currently fighting right now emerged from. Peace accords, South Sudan secedes, something they'd wanted to do for a long time. The RSF becomes formed. That's the ones who originated in the war in Darfur. The current conflict right now between the regular government and the RSF, I believe that the heads of both of those groups were aligned at one point, because you've got this president here, Omar al-Bashir, who is very unpopular. He's been around for about 30 years until this point. He is toppled after a series of military protests, popular protests, civilians, and then ultimately a military coup. And they start by establishing a military civilian government, but that government is not favored by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who's the head of the armed forces, the state armed forces, and his deputy, who is the RSF leader, a guy called Hemeti. That's what he's usually known as. Hemeti basically just means like baby Muhammad. It's like a name that a mother would give, like a nickname a mother would give to a child, because apparently he's got a bit of a baby face. So looks can be deceiving though. So from 2021, after this, you got this overthrow of the military civilian government, and then you've got the head of the armed forces and de facto president, along with the RSF, which is kind of like semi-independent from the government, but they're still supported by the government, and they were created in large part by the government, are at odds over control over money and everything else. And I think for this 2-year period, the regular government and military was trying to absorb the RSF into the army. They were trying to make the RSF part of the regular Sudanese army. The problem was that the RSF had become so strong and so independently powerful at this point that they were big enough to basically fight off the government. So there's a shooting outbreak in 2023. Both sides trade blame for who started it. I think it definitely started after the RSF members were redeploying around the country. The government saw that as a threat. But who fired the first shot, I don't think we actually know. But the RSF, which was like a de facto infantry of the state at this point, just seized most of the capital. It was reclaimed in late 2023 or 2025 actually, but they kind of split off, and RSF, SAF, conflict map. But it looks essentially like, I don't even know it. Let's go with Sky News. It looks essentially like this. You've got the regular government in charge of Khartoum along the border with Egypt and in control of the Nile over here. That's what this is. This is the Nile. Here you've got the RSF. They've just taken over al-Fasher in the south, which is where Darfur is. Well, that's the Darfur region. They have this little strip of land here, which is kind of important because it's the border between Sudan and Libya, as well as I think they actually can control here as well up to Egypt. Chad, obviously, they've got a border with South Sudan. So that's more or less where we are now. The amount of abuses these guys are guilty of is kind of fucking insane. But war crimes, etc. So just this year, actually, the Sudanese armed forces got full control over Khartoum, which is the capital, but then it was followed up very shortly by the RSF taking control of this strip where the border is between Egypt and Libya. And then also they just recently captured al-Fasher, which is like the big city in the capital city in the North Darfur area. So basically like a power struggle between two people who were once more or less on the same side. So I've been looking into the different forces as well, different countries that are involved. Rapid Support Forces, that's the RSF, that's what they're called. They, similar to Yemen, not in the slightest. It's not that similar to Yemen, no. It's like it's very much its own. I think the thing is when you're looking at learning about things like this and being able to internalize it, it's important to look for similarities and themes and patterns. But you can only do that to a certain degree, right? Because broad lenses and patterns are only enough insofar as you can absorb the information and make sense of it and give you a broad understanding of what's going on. But when you go down into details, you want to be really careful of applying that pattern recognition to sort of like fill in blanks, which I think a lot of people do when they're using like concepts and pattern recognition. So for example, a big thing with the South is that throughout Sudan's existence, really, since the 70s, there have been 2 civil wars that have lasted both like decades. They've fought a lot, and it's largely been because people in the South, or I guess what used to be Southern Sudan as well, it's now a separate country since 2011, that people in the South there's like an ethnic split. So ever since the Ottomans and the British, northern parts of Sudan, like where the capital is, and where like along the Nile in these towns, were much more well developed, and they were a lot more prosperous. And these are also where the Arab population, the majority, like 70% of Sudan, is what's where most of them. That's where they are predominant. So that also leaves over here, and more concentrated in the south, and obviously what was once south of Sudan, is the Black Africans. So a lot of this conflict is kind of like Arab versus African, even though the government and the RSF are both Arab. They're both Arab groups fighting each other. So it's not just like a race conflict, even though that does play a big part in it. Also, understanding it in terms of like Arab versus Black is something that only really came up quite in recent decades, even though there's been conflict between these groups for hundreds of years, because religion, well, South Sudan, what is now South Sudan, is to do with like a Christian Muslim thing, I think, but I don't know much about their split. But it is also ethnic, because well, the ethnic lines also exist within Sudan, not just between North and South. Because North and South Sudan was, there's always been a big divide there. They were run as separate entities almost by the British. They were run as two separate administrations after the Ottoman Empire fell. A lot of Sudanese Arabs are Black too. Yep. And a lot of the Black groups, there's not one Black group in Sudan. There are multiple different ethnic groups with different customs and dialects, and they overlap with each other. The people in the south, especially say in Darfur, it's like three big ethnic groups, three big ones, which is the don't know how to pronounce these, but it's the Zakawa, the Masalit, and the Fur, those people. And they all, obviously, for different points of history, have fought with each other as much as they fought with Arab tribes. But specifically, they have a history of, say, like pre-20th century, they had a history of fighting with people who lived along between sort of like the border areas between Chad and Sudan. Like they weren't really tied to borders, was the sort of like Arab like cattle and camel herding tribes, like nomadic people almost. They would often fight over land with African farmers in these areas who are more stationary. And especially in the 70s, when there were droughts and there were other economic difficulties, then the government would try to impose economic would carry out economic actions and impose economic policies that would advantage the Arab population and prioritize them over the ethnic minorities in these regions, which is why a lot of them fought against the government, because they were neglected, because they were ill-treated. And then that's where a lot of where the civil conflict comes from. Where the RSF comes in, that I know about so far, is that they used to be called the Janjaweed, or they used to be called that by other people. And this was a group that was mobilized by al-Bashir, the long-lasting dictator, against Black minority insurgents in the Darfur region. So they're made up of people from that region, the Janjaweed people. They're made up of two clans mainly, the Mohammed and the Maharia, and they're also headed by two different key figures. So that's like the origins of the RSF, the group who we know about now. But today, the RSF are the ones who just went into al-Fasher and murdered like thousands of people. So they have these two leaders. One of them is not really that relevant anymore, but he was in the 2000s. Musa Hilal, who was the chief of the Mohammed clan, he was part of the original forming of the Janjaweed militias, and he was accused of gross human rights violations and ethnic cleansing and genocide against the Black minority groups in this region. He is now in jail. We'll find out why in a minute. And there's the other guy who's a lot more relevant now, Mohammed Dagalo, who is generally known as Hemeti, or is it Hamudti? I don't know. But it basically just means like little Muhammad, like because he's a baby face, apparently. He's got a baby face. So although like I feel like gangsters say that shit about each other, but anyway. This guy is very, very, very interesting. He is a school dropout who became a small-time trader. He was one of the leaders from the Maharia clan, the two clans, the Hamid and the Maharia clan. He mutinied in 2007 because he thought that his soldiers were being ill paid or not paid at all by the government. And even though he was involved in pretty serious crimes against the Darfur region and against Darfur rebels, he actually almost struck a deal with them as well. And although all of his commanders are from the same clan, like they're all from the same ethnic group, but he will enlist regular soldiers from all the ethnic groups, and including people who used to fight against him with the Darfur rebels. But he eventually was schmoozed by the government and got decent pay, and also got like rankings, like high rankings for his officers, which actually caused a bit of friction between them and the regular military, because people were getting roles that people in the military had been training for their whole lives and getting educated for, but they didn't. But they were kind of sidelined and surpassed by these valuable, like, mercenaries, basically, in the South. They were incorporated at one point into the, what was it? Into border intelligence after the fighting in Darfur. They were put under the National Security Service, which was used in a proxy war against Chad. So this guy, Hemeti, at this point he's got men who are like fighting like assisting anti-government people in Chad to go up to the government, to go up to like the capital and overthrow the regime in 2008. He was so favored and in such a good position that the president actually called him his protector. So they were used to crush rebel movements. Sometimes they were less successful than others, but they would crush rebel movements in the south, specifically in Darfur. And the big problem now was that in 2012, so you've got these two clans who are being mobilized by the government to deal with rebel groups. Like, that's what they are. They're clans who are basically turned into mercenaries to deal with rebel groups, and they have done so in very, very brutal ways. These are the guys who are accused of committing genocide and ethnic cleansing and everything else since 2003. Now, they discovered gold, or gold was discovered in a region called Jebel Amir, which is in this western area, southwest, and North Darfur. And this was in 2012. In 2012, this is 1 year after South Sudan unanimously votes for independence to break away. And the problem is that most of Sudan's oil was in the south. Like 3/4 of it was in the south. So Sudan has just lost 3/4 of its oil supply to this breakaway in the south. So when gold gets discovered in this ethnic minority region, and there's a gold rush, they're very eager to get their hands on it. The gold mines were seized by Musa Hilal, the Mohammed chief, the head of one of the two clans that fought rebels in the south. He takes over these gold mines, and he sells the gold to the government, which then sells it on to Dubai. And but within 5 years, gold is like close to half of Sudan's exports. So it's incredibly valuable. The problem is the government's thinking, why do we have to buy gold off of our own mercenaries? Why can't we just take the mines? They try to, and Hilal denies them. And then the government sides with Hemeti from the RSF, who at this point is in a feud with Hilal. And so the RSF just basically attacks the region and seizes the gold mines, and Hilal is arrested. So he's basically out of the picture, this one of these tribe chiefs. So the other clan leader, Hemeti, is now in charge of the gold mines. So this guy is basically just like a massive fucking hustler, right? Like he starts out as a small-time trader after dropping out of school, right? He becomes a mercenary for the South. He becomes a high-ranking military commander with no formal education or training, surpassing all these people from the government, from the regular forces. He becomes a National Intelligence Service operator. He engages in proxy wars. He becomes a border guard, because obviously these are border territories with Chad. He becomes a gold trader. So he amasses a shitload of wealth, becomes probably the biggest gold trader and border guard in the entire country, basically being mobilized by the government as a mercenary, but he's becoming so powerful that he will eventually come to rival the government itself. So find his picture, yeah, why not? I've actually forgotten what he looks like. They say this guy has a baby face. Maybe he did like 20 years ago, but I don't really see it. But yeah, this is your guy. That's your guy. I'll maybe get two pictures up actually. You can see it a little bit. Why not? What else has this guy done? Besides all the genocide air, obviously that's on his jack of all trades list. He recently, I think he works with a Canadian PR firm to manage his image, which is quite incredible. His relatives have a company called al-Junaid, which deals with investment. It deals with mining, obviously. It deals with transport, car rentals, iron, steel. By sort of like the late 2010s, he's basically in control of like the largest budget in the country. He now has about 70,000 men under his command, and the command structure is still basically all Darfur Arabs, mostly people, or predominantly people from his own clan. He has been involved in Yemen. He had a battalion, I think, dispatched to the borders. Well, both sides did actually. The regular army was dispatched to Yemen with one battalion, but he was also, or him and his guys were also dispatched to Yemen to cover the border with Saudi and also to fight in the coastline. So, and in 2019, he sent a brigade to Libya because he supports General Haftar, who is the Russian-backed, Egyptian-backed, he's backed by a few people, guy against the recognized Libyan government. So that's your one big figure. Now, to show you how intertwined a lot of this is, the other guy, the regular army guy, is definitely not a baby face. Does not have a baby face in the slightest. His name is General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. So, interestingly, just before RSF people were dispatched to Yemen to deal with the Houthis and to deal with the border, this guy, Burhan, was also sent to Yemen to deal with Houthis as well. So, and both of these people were able to do that through the UAE. The UAE mobilized both of these two guys' factions against Houthis in Yemen, although the RSF force was much bigger. Like they played a much more prominent role. The UAE is important because right now the UAE supports the RSF. They give them weapons, drones, and artillery from China. They give them financial support. They were actually accused, the UAE, of aiding and abetting genocide by the Sudanese government for supporting these guys. And the reason the case got dismissed in the ICJ was because when the UAE joined the Genocide Convention, they gave one reservation about Article 9, I think it is, where they didn't want to come under the ICJ's jurisdiction. So that's why they didn't get to to hold UAE culpable for genocide. Now, the interesting thing about these two is that they were once on the same side, not even that long ago, or kind of. Like, obviously, the RSF was once a kind of like loose arm of the Sudanese government, or actually, they were fairly tight with the government at one point. And when the dictator of 30 years was overthrown and a military civilian government was established in 2021, I think. Wait, was it 2021 or was that when there was the coup? No, 2019. In 2019, they overthrew al-Bashir and then they had a military civilian government for 2 years. But that military civilian government was overthrown primarily by these two because neither of them liked having a civilian government involved with what they were doing. So after 2021, that's when there starts to become a rift between these two because the RSF at this point has basically just become way too powerful for the regular army and the government to be comfortable with. The RSF has been weaponized for a bunch of different causes. They've been given special treatment by the government in a lot of cases. They've also been internationally supported. So at this point, they're like an infantry. They're like the de facto infantry of the country. Like they're the ones that could succeed on the ground and like taking control over a city. So they did. They took control over quite a bit of Khartoum in 2023, and it happened after a gunfight. We don't know who started it, but we do know that the RSF were redeploying across the country at around the same time, and this threatened the government. And then whatever happened in between that sparked the conflict that we have now. So, and all the while, you've got these black African, like the non-Arab minorities in the South who bear the brunt of all of this fucking nonsense between these two wankers and all these other countries involved with their mixed incentives and their geopolitical maneuvering, resulting in the worst humanitarian crisis of the present day. In this war alone, I think in the last 2 years, since the fighting started in 2023, I believe 150,000 people have died in this conflict, not to mention millions of people being displaced. There have been famines declared in, I think, several parts of the area now, the Zamzam camp in particular, where like with everything, right? With the 2+ deaths per 10,000 per day, all of that shit, right? So, and that camp where the famine was declared, Zamzam, has just recently been destroyed by the RSF. Allegations of genocide come in as well, specifically against the RSF. Both sides have been accused of war crimes and atrocities and all this shit, but the allegation of genocide specifically against the RSF is because there's this understanding that they are doing what they're doing, particularly in the southern areas that they control, with one goal, which is to remove or to massively shrink the non-Arab ethnic population in the region. That's so whenever they take over a place, you'll usually see like they take over a city and then like 250,000 civilians flee the area. Like that's kind of seen as much like an intention of this guy, of Hemeti. So that's where I am now. Doesn't Chad support the RSF? I don't know where everyone is on that, but I don't know about Chad. I know that RSF and Haftar support each other. Egypt supports the government. The UAE supports... Is that right? Does the Egypt support the government and the UAE supports the RSF? Does Iran support the government? I don't know actually where Iran is. I think Russia supports the RSF. China indirectly supports the RSF because they sell weapons to the UAE. UAE gets the weapons to the RSF. So...
I like your hair. You look more like my half-Arab son who is very handsome, of course.
Whoa!
Smiley face emoji.
Joan! Thanks for the 9999. Thanks for the massive dono. I really appreciate it. God damn. A little research stream worthwhile, eh? Iran supports the government. So Iran supports the government, but China indirectly supports RSF. Does Russia support the RSF? This is where we need to find out more. It's Matt, it's so much of it as well. It's just like, it's just to do with other countries fucking proxy engaging. It's just Wagner. That's okay. That makes more sense. Yeah. Obviously, Wagner would be involved with these dudes. Man. Okay. So that's where I am so far. That's where I am as of now. I guess what we can do is look at the events of the last couple of days and see what happened there. RSF takeover of Fasher. Fuck me. Okay. Allegedly they control mines. Oh, that's why they're involved. Who does Ethiopia support? I believe Ethiopia and Eritrea both support the RSF. I think. America has sanctions on both sides. Although they do talk a bit more about the RSF. Blinken goes quite hard on the RSF. Or he did when he was the guy. Who does Israel support? You know what? I have no idea. I know Israel has helped South Sudan with economic development. Okay. What have they done with Sudan? This is a wonderful article. Okay, the less Israel has to do with this conflict, the better. How RSF is adopting Israel's template for genocide in Sudan. Okay, bub. Okay, that's fine. That's okay, Al Jazeera. You know, you're just you're doing your job. You got a job to do. Do your job. Okay. Right. October 2025. They have zero confirmed involvement. I would think they've sold weapons to both sides. Okay. Interesting. Does Qatar support the government? I don't know. We'll get into that. We'll get into which countries are where for whatever reasons later. I know the UAE. The UAE, obviously, their interest is gold, right? Is that why they care about the RSF? Is it because of gold? All right. This is so fucking brutal, man. Visible from space. Sudan's bloodied sands expose a massacre of thousands. Satellite pictures taken after the fall of El Fasher show evidence of mass killings. The hot sand around the Sudanese city of El Fasher is stained red with the blood of more than 2,000 massacred civilians. The pools of blood are so thick, the piles of bodies so exposed, that the ethnic purge allegedly committed by Sudanese paramilitary rebels is visible from space. Militia groups defending the city alongside the army alleged the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, rebel group committed heinous crimes against innocent civilians and said most of the dead were women, children, and the elderly. A video purported to show a child soldier murdering a grown man in cold blood. Another supposedly showed RSF fighters executing civilians moments after pretending to release them. What do you mean from space? As in there's so much blood in the fucking sand that they can see it from space. I think is what they're saying there. The total death toll could not immediately be confirmed, but satellite pictures taken after the city fell over the weekend, following an 18-month siege, showed evidence of mass killings. Oh yeah, it was under siege for 18 months. Yeah. And the full shebang, you know, surrounding the place, blocking aid, etc. City had been under siege for 18 months. Is this going to be your distressing footage, etc. video? This is them chasing civilians during the ambush. Okay, let's see. Distressing images. Whoa. So that kid's just about to shoot that guy, right? Is that what's going on there? Yeah, that guy is a fucking, his fucking voice isn't even broken. Jesus. Oh yeah, he's clocking his, yeah, okay.
من فاشر السلطان حتى هذا المكان هذه قوات الدعم السريع. الله أكبر الله أكبر.
عمروا عيونكم ونظركم يا سادة.
Let's not get a strike. This is a fucking news channel, dude. This isn't like Twitter. This is a fucking news site. I don't even have age verification in the UK here. Like, whatever. Well, I mean, if you want to, you can look into all the reports of shit like this that's been going on in this region for fucking decades. Like, stories about people going, like RSF guys, or before there was RSF, going into these southern areas and like fucking raping women or even sexually assaulting like little babies as young as 1 year old, raping people and screaming at them about how they're going to force them to have Arab kids, and like the burning people's houses down and all that shit. Yeah, it's like, it's been going on for a while. There's not really any fucking holding back in these areas. Analysis by the Yale School of Public Health Humanitarian Research Lab, HRL, which has been tracking the siege using open source images and satellite imagery, found clusters of objects consistent with the size of human bodies and reddish ground discoloration, thought to be either blood or disturbed soil. Body-sized objects were found clustered around vehicles and along an RSF sand berm built around the city. There have been reports of civilians being shot as they tried to break out and flee. The lab said that it also found evidence of door-to-door clearance operations. It concluded al-Fasher appears to be in a systematic and intentional process of ethnic cleansing of indigenous non-Arab communities through forced displacement and summary execution. More than 250,000 people had endured starvation and bombardment in the city after taking refuge in what was the last army stronghold in the vast Darfur region. Sudan's 2.5-year civil war has rekindled ethnic bloodshed in the region, with RSF fighters accused of massacring black African groups to take their land. The RSF is largely drawn from Arab militias and formed from the notorious Janjaweed, responsible for genocide and mass atrocities in Darfur 20 years ago. The RSF and other enclaves, including Guinea in 2023, led to ethnic massacres of thousands of people. Refugees and aid workers have been warning for 18 months that similar atrocities were likely if al-Fasher fell. Cameron Hudson, a former US National Security Council Director for Africa, said, "We have seen what is unfolding in al-Fasher before. It was 2 years ago in Yanina? Is that how you say that? I don't know. As the RSF took the city, it initiated a campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide. It's happening again, and still we do nothing. Shame on them, shame on us. Tens of thousands of people have fled El Fasher since it fell, many heading westwards for Tawila. A video clip purported to show scores of people fleeing the city, clutching their belongings as RSF fighters shouted racial insults and beat them. In another scene, several militants dressed in the RSF's trademark brown uniforms and turbans were seen packed into a truck chasing unarmed civilians as they ran for their lives. Gunfire rang out as one fighter shouted, "Kill the Nuba," a reference to Sudan's black African tribes. Yeah, is it Nuba? And oh wait, is Nuba the same as the Nubians? Are they different? The commanders in charge of El Fasher's defense left 2 days before the city was overrun. They knew it was going to happen and left the people to die. Well, the question I have is, who was defending El Fasher? Was it government held, or was it held by rebel groups, by minority rebel groups? Because the South used to. Am I thinking like back to the 80s? Because obviously back in the 80s, the South used to have those like liberation groups and all that shit, or like local militias, but I don't know if they still have that. Is it just the government now? It was government held. Well, I guess Sudanese forces are here, so... Huh. You're saying local militias and rebel groups? Mixed answers, I see. This is them celebrating the takeover. Is there any audio here? No. Are you for intervention in such cases, Loner? I have no idea who you would intervene. I guess you'd intervene on behalf of the government, but I have no idea if that. The thing is, I don't think RSF really have any. It's not like they represent some kind of like fucking oppressed minority or whatever. It's not like we say with Hezbollah, where they're representing the Shiites who are otherwise neglected by the government. The RSF are led by people who come from nomadic groups that, for a long time just kind of lived between the borders. Like they didn't even really recognize the borders between, like, say, Chad and Sudan. Like they were camel herders. So, and my understanding of them is that they were, for the most part, weaponized by the government to defeat the actual like oppressed minorities in the South, to put down revolts and things like that. So, but obviously, the government fighting against the RSF are the same people is the same guy who helped the RSF overthrow the civilian military government in 2021. So, don't know. Reports indicated that the RSF was deliberately forcing displaced civilians eastward into areas under its control, away from humanitarian hubs such as Tawila. Okay. RSF deliberately forcing displaced civilians eastwards, away from humanitarian hubs. According to Jeremy Konindik, president of Refugees International, the RSF was preventing people from fleeing the town in other directions, specifically blocking movement south and west, compelling them to move east, where there was no safety or access to aid. Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, said, "We are witnessing a deeply disturbing pattern of abuses in Fasher, including systematic killings, torture, and sexual violence." The UN Human Rights Office said it had received multiple alarming reports that the RSF was carrying out atrocities, including summary executions. Volker Turk, the UN Human Rights Chief, said the risk of further large-scale ethnically motivated violations and atrocities in Fasher was mounting by the day. Massacre locations. Okay. Sudan's catastrophic civil war is well into its third year, and the UN and aid agencies say the fighting has produced the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Rivalry between General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the de facto president, and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, his deputy, flared into open fighting in April 2023. See, that's what I mean. The RSF guy, like the RSF leader, was the deputy of the regular military's leader. Right? It's just, dude. Violence has forced 14 million people to flee their homes, and some estimates have put the death toll as many as 150,000. The health system has collapsed, and several parts of the country have been plunged into famine. A UN fact-finding mission has accused both sides of committing an appalling range of harrowing human rights violations and international crimes, including mass rape, arbitrary arrests, and torture. The rivals have turned to regional allies for help, with the UAE accused of backing the RSF with supplies and mercenaries through Chad and Libya. Sudan's army has meanwhile reportedly been supported by Egypt, Russia, and Iran. The UAE strongly denies supporting either side and says it has been pushing for a ceasefire. The country is part of a so-called Quad of Nations alongside the United States, Saudi, and Egypt, leading efforts to find a negotiated peace. "2,000 civilians killed according to..." What group says this? The Yale School of Public Health Humanitarian Research Lab. It's keeping them within RSF territory and away All right, let's see what else there is. I think Sky was claiming that 10,000 people had died. Let's see. Sky News, Sudan. Fasher. They're saying tens of thousands. Okay. Not able to independently verify the claims. They're saying tens of thousands in 2 days. Analysts believe. Let's see. Warning.
Human rights observers believe that thousands of people are currently being killed by the rapid support forces in Fasher, with bloodstains and dead bodies even being seen from space. Doctors, journalists, and first responders are currently being held captive by the RSF, all in a telecommunications blackout. This is the humanitarian catastrophe that many warned would happen if Fasher fell to the RSF. The berm that the RSF has been using to besiege the city in recent months was then used as an execution site by their forces. North Darfur's authorities...
Wait. Say that again?
...to the RSF. The berm that the RSF has been using to besiege the city in recent months was then used as an execution site by their forces. North Darfur's authorities have said around 460 civilians have been killed in the last functioning hospital in the city.
What do they say?
Authorities have said around was then used as an execution site by their forces. North Darfur's authorities have said around 460 civilians have been killed in the last functioning hospital in the city. We can't independently verify the figure, but satellite images analyzed by Yale Humanitarian labs show clusters of white by red stains.
In the past 48 hours since we've had imagery over Fasher, we see a proliferation of objects that weren't there before RSF took control of El Fasher, and they are approximately 1.3 meters to 2 meters long, which is critical because in satellite imagery at very high resolution, that's the average length of a human body lying vertical. What we also see in
Sephram and Siredurf, thanks for the goal. Really appreciate it. And Mark, thanks for the 50 NOKs. Okay.
some of these objects is a C shape and a J shape, which is extremely important because when people are shot on the run, they will often fall in a way that presents as a C or a J because of the bend in their hips or their knees as they hit the ground. Additionally, we're seeing a proliferation of a phenomena we've never seen before in satellite imagery, which is a red discoloration.
Doctors, journalists, and politicians are among the civilians that the RSF is holding incommunicado, with some families sharing that they've been contacted to pay a ransom. The man in this video is seen asking his loved ones to pay for his release. So who's backing the RSF? The United Arab Emirates has been widely accused of supporting the RSF in this war and pushing their capture of Sudan. And though the UAE denies these claims, intelligence officers from both sides told Sky News that the UAE was funneling arms to the RSF through Chad. This was even during the height of their siege on al-Fasher, bolstering their arms supply as they were starving and shelling the population of the city into submission. The international community has essentially failed Sudan, and now thousands of people in al-Fasher are paying the ultimate price. And as the RSF cements their control of the Darfur region, all we can do is watch and wait to see who manages to survive.
Tens of thousands of people have been killed in the Sudanese city of al-Fasher by the RSF in a 2-day window after the paramilitary group captured the regional capital, analysts believe. Sky News is not able to independently verify the claim by Yale Humanitarian Lab. Wait! This is the same people. Now they're saying tens of... wait, were they just not properly quoted in the Telegraph article? Or were they just talking about the blood pools? Or is it one day after? Is it 29th? Next day article quotes the research lab church group claiming tens of thousands killed in a 2-day window. Tens of thousands in 2 days. Let me find out what the actual group said. That seems like an insane number, but okay, let's see. I think it's 250,000 people were in this city, right? Nathaniel Raymond, executive director of Yale Humanitarian Lab, said, "In the past 48 hours, we've had satellite imagery over al-Fasher. We see a proliferation of objects that weren't there before RSF took control of al-Fasher. They are approximately 1.3 to 2 meters long, which is critical because in satellite imagery at a very high resolution, that's the average length of a human body lying vertical." Meni Menawi, the governor of North Darfur, said on X that 460 civilians have been killed in the last functioning hospital in the city. The Sudan Doctors Network has also shared that the RSF cold-bloodedly killed everyone they found inside the al-Saudi hospital, including patients, their companions, and everyone else present in the wards. Everyone they found in the al-Saudi hospital, including patients, their companions, and anyone in the wards. WHO chief Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said it was appalled and deeply shocked by the reports. The satellite images support the claims of a massacre at Al Saudi Hospital, according to Mr. Raymond, who said YHL's report detailed a large pile of them, objects believed to be bodies, against a wall at one building at Saudi Hospital. We believe that's consistent with reports that patients and staff were executed en masse. Supported religion of peace. Get a new joke, you fucking piece of shit. Go back. 24 hours. 24 hours to learn a new joke. Okay. Supported YHL report of large pile of bodies against a wall. To be bodies against a wall at one building at Saudi Hospital. In a video message released on Wednesday, RSF commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo acknowledged violations in al-Fasher and claimed an investigation committee should start to hold any soldier or officer accountable. Like, remember, if you didn't hear me say, this guy, Hemeti, he works with a Canadian PR firm in an effort to work his image, to finesse his public image. Interesting. Army soldiers fled before capture.
Hundreds are pouring in from al-Fasher, the symbolic Sudanese city captured by the Rapid Support Forces, arriving at this safe zone, injured and terrified.
So mainly our trauma cases. We see a lot of gunshots infected, unstable fracture, wounds infected as well. So those are the injuries and tortured. And on the other hand, we see a lot of malnutrition. For example, all of the kids are malnourished, and even most of the adults one as well. So malnutrition and trauma cases mainly.
How many people have come into Tawila over the last 2 days of RSF capture?
So the last 2 days we received between 800 and 1,000 people arriving, but it's quite complicated to have a proper number as some come in by truck.
As the civilians poured into Tawila, so did some army soldiers, who surrendered their arms and took safe passage out of al-Fasher, leaving close to 200,000 people behind, to face ethnic violence and summary executions at the hands of the RSF. With burnt roads leading out of the city and so much bloodshed that red-stained streets can be seen from space, after 24 hours of silence, Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan finally addressed the nation.
Everyone is following what happened in al-Fasher. The leadership there, including the security committee, estimated that they should leave the city due to the systematic destruction and killing of civilians it was subjected to.
Insiders tell Sky News that the army accepted an indirect deal with the RSF to facilitate safe passage for their soldiers, leaving civilians in North Darfur's capital to their fate. This wouldn't be the first time that the army withdraws from key cities in Darfur at critical moments. In the past, we've investigated the army cutting deals with the RSF just as these cities are about to fall. One of the first towns in North Darfur to fall to the RSF in this war faced similar brutal ethnic violence in the wake of military collapse, with the army abruptly withdrawing from Khartoum's garrison.
All of the army's intelligence withdrew before the attack. Soldiers were meant to be part of the defense.
In North Darfur, we met a commander fighting for al-Fasher just weeks before it fell. Al-Fasher is the ultimate symbol for us, he says. We tell our soldiers to fight until their last breath. Now, as the RSF celebrates their capture of the entire Darfur region, it's slowly emerging who stayed until their last breath and who left the city behind.
Whoa. The commander is known for committing atrocities in Darfur in the early 2000s as a Janjaweed militia leader, and the RSF has been accused of carrying out genocide in Darfur 20 years on. Sources have told Sky News the RSF is holding doctors, journalists, and politicians captive, demanding ransoms from some families to release their loved ones. One video shows a man from Fasher armed with an armed man kneeling on the ground, telling his family to pay $15,000. The currency was not made clear. In some cases, ransoms have been paid, but then more messages come demanding that more money be transferred to secure release. Muammar Ibrahim, a journalist based in the city, is currently being held by the RSF, who initially shared videos of him crouched on the ground, surrounded by fighters, announcing his hometown had been captured under duress. He is being held incommunicado as his family scrambles to negotiate his release. Muammar courageously covered the siege of al-Fasher for months, enduring starvation and shelling. The Committee to Protect Journalists Regional Director Sarah Kuda said, "The abduction of Muammar Ibrahim is a grave and alarming reminder that journalists in al-Fasher are being targeted simply for telling the truth." Okay. Well. Shit. Okay. So. We're going to find out who backs who. The UN Security Council met and spoke about it for 2 hours yesterday. Oh, that's that fucking UN aid chief. Sky News item from an hour ago called "Is it Genocide?" Man, it really just doesn't get that much media attention, does it? It's crazy. What we got here? This is just verifying the satellite images. Okay. This is just for one video, isn't it? Several videos have emerged showing men wearing military fatigues, and some with what appear to be RSF patches carrying out extreme acts of violence around El Fasher. The UN's Sudan coordinator said it had received credible reports of summary executions in the city during an interview with the BBC on Wednesday. BBC Verify has approached RSF for comment. Imran Abdullah, an advisor to the paramilitary, denied the group's fighters were targeting civilians in an interview with the BBC on Monday. Sudan has been ravaged by the war since the conflict broke out in 2023, prompted by the collapse of the SAF and the RSF's fragile ruling coalition. More than 150,000 people have died across the country, and about 12 million have fled their homes since then. Okay. This is just them identifying the insignias and patches. Okay. BBC, I think it was on 2 videos, wasn't it? Most of the clips reviewed by BBC Verify are in dusty and sandy rural locations, making it hard to say where exactly they took place. However, we did geolocate one video showing the summary shooting of an unarmed man at a university building in Al Fasher. The clip showed an unarmed man sitting amid dozens of dead bodies in a hallway. As the video progressed, he was seen turning towards the camera, which followed an armed man who was descending the stairs. The fighter then raised his rifle and fired a single shot, knocking the unarmed man to the ground, where he lay motionless. A number of similarly distressing clips are circulating online. Difficult to geolocate as they are recorded outside the city itself, where there are very few visible landmarks. But Verify managed to place one of the fighters who appeared in multiple execution videos in the area around El Fasher in recent days. Okay, article. Placing one particular fighter in multiple execution videos around Fasher. Okay. Whew. Did you comment on the Sudan ICJ case? What, with the Emirates? Yeah. It's just, it doesn't go anywhere though. It didn't go anywhere because the Emirates didn't, because the ICJ doesn't have any jurisdiction. Because when the Emirates joined the Genocide Convention, they said, yeah, we're not going to come under ICJ jurisdiction, sorry. And no one, and yeah, there wasn't any objection. There was no objection to them making that reservation, even from Sudan. Sudan was in a position that they could have objected to that, but they didn't. So, shit. Why are you posting this link from Darfur 24? The leaders of the army, the joint forces, and the North Darfur government left before the division fell. Okay. A Sudanese military source confirmed that the force withdrawing from El Fasher reached the town of Karnoy, located approximately 200 kilometers northwest of El Fasher, while the governor arrived in Tina. The source added that the command and control commanders left in a separate group. Okay. Military source confirming the movements. Okay. And Cello, thanks for the $9.99. This goes to the Ban Video Games Slop Fund. Yeah? You want to pay me to not play video games? Shit. Guys, we don't need to compare this to Gaza. It's enough to know Israel is doing both of them. Subscribe, you fucking assholes. I mean, sorry.